All right, three, two, fun. We're live. Welcome to another episode on a podcast. Your host, Stephen Maxted. And we have some great energy on the other side of the screen here today with Patrick Hilario, with principal of, wait, no, I'm reading it out on the stress point here, Alliance Real Estate, which is a few things in one. We're gonna dive in a lot more today to discuss what you're really doing here. We had so much fun on our last meeting, just learning a lot about each other and where we came from. Hopefully, we can capture as much as that. I feel like we could talk for literally hours on here. But let's start off with a little bit about you from you, Patrick, and thanks for joining today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Stephen. And yeah, as the principal of Alliance Real Estate, like my background was in teaching. Like I was a bio teacher for about 5 years. And during that time, like I got into real estate investing, got into a little bit of financial literacy before I became a teacher. And kind of happened was fell into the private coaching side of real estate and financial literacy a little bit by accident in that I had a student that was like at first I was trying to raise money from him to like do some real estate deals, joint venture. And he's like, hey, like I kind of want to just do this on my own. And he asked, like, hey, like, can you teach me? I was like, hey, I could teach bio and sciences. I'm doing the real estate. I don't know if I could teach it myself. And he's like,
Right,
hey, I'll offer you tattoos for life if you just show me the ropes. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, I'll take that deal any day, pretty much. And basically showed him the step by steps and how to do deals using none of his own money. And he closed his first deal in like 27 days. And that's kind of how I found out, like, oh, okay, like there's other ways of teaching, not just in like the public school education system. So now
interesting.
we're kind of here with Alliance Real Estate, where we have our own little virtual and like physical school, so to say, when it comes to like the financial literacy, the real estate
Right,
side, and something that I just started recently is more so the social confidence and networking that comes with building your finances, getting wealth, because it's hard to build wealth if you're kind of stuck in your own bubble. Like you kind of have to put yourself out there a little bit. So we
totally.
help people out with that, and then really just give them like custom step by steps on how they can reach, financial freedom and financial security for their own family and for themselves.
Absolutely. And I know that that was something that really caught my um, attention last time we were chatting because you talked about and kind of like we're bringing it into this combo today is you talked about how unique everyone like in their background is that comes to you guys, and it was really highlighted to me a difference probably from, not to pick on anything with the like a school system style thing, but just as like a comparable is like a lot of the stuff there is less customizable, as it were,
Mhm.
in that side of teaching versus what you guys offer. And what I heard last time was depending on their background, what, like I'm paraphrasing here, so I want you to jump in after this and do
Yeah.
it justice. But you're going through, you're like, hey, like, and you used yourself as an example, a teacher, certain limitations in terms of like income, but how can you leverage your time and some other things that you have on your side to get into real estate, right? Because if you have different time slots off, when are you available, when are you not? How can you do other things? And then you're talking about other folks. I forget all the examples, but you different um, levels of real estate investing, and depends on how fast they want to grow that or what
Mhm.
their ability to do that is, whether in terms of like funds or if it's time. Because if you talked about kind of taking things off your plate as they become um, kind of less important, you mentioned some of the students want to do their own work initially, but you kind of coach a little bit, aiming towards, hey, that's not what you should be doing. If you
Mhm.
like to do it, let's adjust that over time. They kind of came back to you, I think, eventually and said, you're right. I don't really actually like doing the flooring or whatever it was, painting or something
Right.
that much. It's better to have someone else do that and focus on what I'm good at. So I thought there was lots of great keys there, and let's maybe unpack a little bit more as far as that goes. But so you have one student, I guess, initially, and then how did you really get into where you are today? Is kind of like maybe break it down in a few steps. Like what was the next step after that first student that you had there for yourself?
Mhm. Yeah. So like when I started, I probably spent like 5 years, must have been, yeah, I was still in university, and I spent like maybe 5 years just learning about money, learning about real estate. And it got to a point where I was like, man, like what's going on? Like I haven't closed the deal yet. I'm learning all these things. I know the terms, but I just didn't take action. And I was just like, one, afraid to make the jump. Two, I didn't have necessarily all the funds because I just bought my first house right out of university. And I put my life savings into my first time home buyers. Like I spent 5% on this house. Now I'm just like, hey, I got no cash. Like I don't know what to do now. I had just started house hacking where I lived in one room, rented out two other rooms to some friends. And I was like, cool, like I'm making $50 a month, like net. But now I have like no cash. And I had heard about people using other people's money. I always saw it online. And I was like,
Yeah.
hey, like I don't know where to go with this. So I just ended up hiring my own coach. I was just like, hey, I want the paperwork. I wanted to learn how to do this. And at first, like, I just wanted the paperwork, like full transparency. Like, I was like, oh, I could figure this out. Like, I'm a fairly smart guy, got to university, I'm a teacher, whatnot. And once I signed up for that coaching program, then I kind of realized, like, oh, there's a lot more that I don't know, like building systems, running a business, being able to attract capital, find good deals. And I was like, there's a lot here to unpack. And that's kind of where I just started learning real estate in a way that was like customized to me. Cause like my coach at the time, shout out to Nelson there, he was also a teacher. So he knew kind of my busy schedule as a teacher. Plus, I would only really have time maybe during lunch hours and after work to work on the real estate. So he really helped me build the business of real estate investing around my teaching schedule in my life, and then not just have my life just be work. So that's where I was super thankful for him for like customizing all that for me. And the moment I knew it was going to work was once we finished our first BRRRR deal. So the ones that don't know, a BRRRR is buy, renovate, rent, refinance, and then repeat. And I'd done this without using any of my own money. So I found some friends and family members. They knew I had a coach and they knew I had this step-by-step system. And
Yeah.
once we were able to finish that deal, everything was cash flowing. I was able to pay back my money partners. I still remember that day where my coach is like, hey, you get 1 week to like flex after you're done your deal, especially if it goes well. So he's like, hey, make a video showing, just block off the names of people and say like, hey, thanks, Auntie John, or sorry, Tito John, which is like my Tagalog
Yeah.
brains kicking in, Tito's uncle. And I was like, hey, thanks for investing in this deal. You get this much money. I had a friend who invested in the deal. He gets this much money. And I was just showing these checks, something I got from Grant Cardone. And basically,
Cool.
it's part of this system so that you're showing people, hey, like you actually have testimonials. The deal actually went well. And after everyone got paid out, I was like, cool. Like I was able to give people a return and I got to keep the asset and more people were interested after that. And I was like, oh, like this is actually something that's working. And I didn't have to use any of my own money. And at that point, like my view of money completely changed. Like I started seeing that, yeah, you could work hard, save money, but it was just so slow. Like the timeline I was on before was, spend another 5 years saving up, working a job, trying to penny pinch to then do the
Totally.
second deal versus this, like I just found some people that were interested. They already trusted me. They're friends and family. And like everyone had a win-win deal with this. And it didn't have to wait 5 years. Like I did in like, I think the first deal we did in under 3 months. And then after it just got easier and easier. Like more people started to trust that, hey, this system kind of works. And eventually just build enough of a track record that more and more people started asking, like, hey, can you help me figure this out? And
Totally.
when you said with the customized portion of this, um, I started to see that everyone's in a different place in their life. Like I was a teacher, I was working full time. I have students that work full time, other students that run full-time businesses or even multiple businesses, so they're super busy. And I even have students that are still in university looking to close deals. So like everyone has a different level of, let's say, access to money, access to extra time. So I always start with just making sure, okay, we have a customized roadmap because an entrepreneur, especially if they're just starting, they're going to have a very difficult time getting traditional financing versus someone who's been working a 9 to 5 for X amount of years, more than 2 years.
Yeah.
They just walk into a bank with a permanent contract, and then banks are just throwing money at them for getting these rentals. And then a student, usually they have maybe a little bit more time in the summer, but when school hits, they're usually working a part-time job plus doing school. So it's like a mix of, okay, we got to solve the money problem for them and how they can attract that money while
Totally.
also making sure that they have like the time management skills to actually fit real estate into their business. So that's kind of one of my favorite parts of this is that
Yeah.
like we don't just give cookie cutter solutions to these people. And I kind of have in my head like, okay, if they're a student, they're probably around here for that custom plan. They're an entrepreneur, they're here. And if they're a 9 to 5er, they're probably gonna, have access to traditional financing. But
Totally.
then the mindset is usually a little bit different because they're still in that worker employee mindset, and it's like pulling them away from that to be like, hey, like you're running a business, you know, you don't get paid per
Yep.
hour, you get paid for the result, and that can be hard for others to kind of make that transition. But
Totally.
what I like to do is like give them a little bit of plan so they're like easing their way into it, because like you don't have to just like fully make the jump and like quit your job type thing. I know that's very popular online, but I don't really like that philosophy, especially because the goal here is to like reduce your stress when it comes to money. Like we want to set you up for the future, not have you like just again penny pinching, worrying about your investments, worrying about your job and like all the financial security around that.
Totally. No, I think, well, I'm going to dive into some other stuff, but a thing that I just thought of as you were talking here was a quote from Alex Hermosi about the most expensive. I saw it somewhere on Instagram, or whatever. It's like the
Mm.
most expensive thing that we all pay for is the information that we don't know. I think you just did a really good job of highlighting that. We're doing a couple shout outs today on the show for other people, but
I
that's
love
just
I
like
love
resonated.
Hormozy.
Yeah, he's sweet. This is
Yeah.
like, I mean, that one's just such a good one because you're like, once you kind of get over a hurdle of finding out something new, you're like, oh wow, that was either costing me a lot of time or a lot of resource, like
Mm.
money and efforts to accomplish. But I think that's awesome because ultimately you're kind of like, in a simplistic way, the thing that popped into my mind there too is just like a lot of people that sign up for like fitness plans. Not every plan is the same. People have different schedules,
Mhm.
different body type. Like there's a lot of specifics there, and I think that's just in my mind a simplistic way of my thinking. When you were saying that, I'm like, that's so awesome because every plan is individual, but the result is similar. For what the goal is, right? Is where you can get those people to come together to sort of be like, okay, now you're doing real estate investing. Ultimately, no matter where you're coming from, if you're a teacher like yourself, if you're government job, you're left and you're doing this full time, whatever that looks like, you're able to um, look at what their situation and create a reality for them. So that's
Yeah, it
pretty
goes
neat.
far of just like getting the right information at the right time too, because like I could just
Yeah,
give someone everything, but then it
yeah,
might lead to like information overload versus sometimes you just need that one piece, right? Like I had one student and his whole thing was like he was just stuck not being able to scale. Like he was already running a successful business. They do new builds and like flips. He's out in the States and they're doing like $1 to $5 million deals, but it's all like self-funded basically. Like he has one investor that's been with him for a while, and he's like, now I want to scale. So it's like for him, it was like, one, you're not green, right? Like he was already doing deals. He
right,
already understands the idea and power of leverage. He just hasn't taken advantage of that and hasn't tapped into friends and family. So we just made him a quick little script kind of and a plan for the marketing side to like attract friends and family because they already know what he's doing, right? It's just like, hey, like just ask. Worst case scenario,
right.
they tell you they're not interested. And then he comes back after 3 weeks and he's like, yeah, I raised like, I think it was like $254,000 USD. Plus he closed on 2 deals.
Wow,
And I was like, cool. Like, again, his plan was that he wasn't green. So like, it was just these little tweaks. Like all he got was like a little script. And then I just asked him a few questions of like, hey, who do you think might be interested? And then he just went out and took action. And then other students, I have to full on like break them out of the 9 to 5 mindset of like, okay,
totally.
well, what's that limiting belief that's like blocking you from making the jump to real estate? And a big one I find with 9 to 5ers is that they believe that jumping into investing is more risky than their job. And
Ooh,
after we kind of
fun.
ask questions around it, right, they start realizing like, wait, like if I just work my job, like it is risky in the sense that you're on that path to work till
Yeah,
65 or even longer. Like that's like a guarantee. Like you might not even have a shot at freedom versus a little bit of investments. And it doesn't mean like you have to own hundreds of units, right? Each person is different. Like I have some students, they own four, one for each kid. And like part of their
pretty good.
goals is like set up their children and they don't mind working till 65. And I have other students that are like, hey, I got to get out this job like ASAP. And
Right.
for them, like I had another student, he actually almost missed out on like $11,000 on a wholesale because he was stuck at work working minimum wage. And we kind of
Yeah.
sat down after, and I was like, dude, we almost missed out on 11 grand. Like, how long does it take for you to make
To
11
make,
grand
I was
working
just gonna
minimum
do
wage?
that, man. What does that add
Yeah.
up to?
Oh,
How
it's
many
crazy. Like,
hours
I
is
think at
that?
the time, minimum wage was, I'd like to say $11. So it's like 1,000 hours, I'm pretty sure. My math's, yeah, it's 1,000 hours. And if you're working 40 hours a week, it's
We're
25
doing the
weeks
same math.
divided by
Yeah.
4. Yeah, it's like
Oh my God.
6 months and a quarter, like 6 months and a
Yeah,
week.
600
And I was like, dude, that's a long time.
for a
And he's like, yeah,
mistake
that
to
makes
miss
sense.
something.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So for him,
Huh.
he just like it was easy once he saw the opportunity cost. Like he just walked away from his job, didn't look back, and he
Yeah.
was actually the one that inspired me to walk away from my job because then I was like, if he can do it, well, I'm the one coaching him. Like, why don't I do it too? And then I was like, oh,
Right.
I'll take the risk. And then yeah, haven't looked back ever since. Like I took a sabbatical, ended up fully leaving teaching.
Yeah.
And the way I think about it is like worst case scenario, I could
Go
always
back.
go back. Like I'm still
100%.
teaching, and it's gonna really set up my my CV if I'm gonna go back to being an employee. Be like, hey, like Patrick went out and taught in the private sector. Like that just helps me become a better teacher, right? Like maybe it's not public school, but then like
Yeah.
what's really the risk, right? Like if I take the risk, do real estate, kind of start our own school with Alliance Real Estate, worst case scenario, I just go back to teaching. It's not like I really left, right? Um, so yeah, I was like,
Totally.
okay, well, weigh out the pros and cons, and it just made sense, and yeah,
Yeah.
worked out.
Well, the other thing that like popped in my mind there was like I had a real wake up moment for me that changed a bit of like my path. It was at the time it was a big deal. Now I kind of forget the year. I think it was 2017. I want to say
Mhm.
it's 2017, 2018, something like that. But I've been with this company in agriculture for about 7 years. I did a couple of years as a summer student, four and a half, close to 5 years full time. And we're going through a merger and, one of those things where they're trying to keep everybody calm and at work and,
Mm.
doing their thing. And I was just kind of doing that, I guess. And that's how I remember at the time I was like head down, still doing the stuff, called into a meeting one day. I'm like, it doesn't feel like a good meeting for some reason. But, so then all of a sudden my spotty senses were up and that was let go, got a package, whatever you want to look like I can that day. Um, and I for sure thought at that time that that was the path for me. I was just like, I was happy there. I was maybe looking at trying to figure out to do a different role down the way. But at that point, that was one of the first times for me where I really started to look outside of, like, whatever. I panicked and went and got a job right away, by the way. But I had to wait for I had some like legal work to get done on that one just because it was a merger and they sent you a package to actually live and learn. I should have went traveling maybe for a little bit, taking a break, but I just jumped right back
Yeah.
into work and then, um, you know, segue through other parts of life. Had similar things happen two more times on my journey. And each time I became less confident in working for other people, so
Mm.
to say, because I was just like, things can go wrong for them. Whatever we call it, when I call it getting let go or whatever, actually has not a lot to do with me in the bigger picture. One case they shut down like a Winnipeg office for a grain company, or whatever. That was a smaller company and they were based out of Toronto, facilities in Sask, but a dry year a few years ago, just during COVID actually. And drought basically caused some bigger losses for the company, and there's only so much crop to do. But then, you just start thinking differently. So when you're talking about like the 9 to 5 mentality thing, like even though that job as a sales rep was really not 9 to 5, there was the security of that paycheck was dangerous. But
Mhm.
then now you're doing other thing, or I'm doing companies and stuff. It's like, yeah, you rely on yourself there, right? For
Mhm.
those folks that are listening or whatever, it's ultimately you're putting a lot of weight on your shoulders. You got to know how to run your finances, get an accountant, hopefully get some other help, going there, unless that is your specialty, which is great. That's a great
Right.
person to start a business, is someone who has that background. If they can do the other side of things and make the sales or whatever services that they're doing, but it's a little bit more for you, but ultimately it's not a lot there. You just have more control. You know when the bank is running out of money versus you don't know when the company is running out of money. They don't really tell you
Totally.
that.
Yeah.
All of a sudden it's just a meeting, a phone call saying, hey, this is your notice. See ya. So that's an interesting piece for people like realize is the security there. And that's probably what that, and the time piece too, right? Because you're only
Mhm.
trading time for money during the day on those jobs. But if you have more time to be in meetings, because that's when other people are working mostly. So you got to get that stuff done. Anyways, that's my rant on that.
Totally.
But I
And
could
even
totally see
like,
where the thinking of that is for those folks.
yeah. And even like access to banks, right? Like when are banks open? It's like when
Hours,
people are
yeah,
at work. And it's like, okay, well, how do I get
totally.
financing if I gotta only, go on the weekend? Sometimes they're only open on Saturdays, and some banks aren't even open on Saturdays. So yeah,
Totally.
like the access to time was huge. Now the con of that is like you also want systems so that you're not just like messing around during that time, right? So it's like oddly for me, I still almost use the teacher blocks. Like, right now it's, closer to like almost noon. So I'm like, okay, well, it's going to be period 4 in my head, right? And I still use those periods kind of
Right.
block off
Yeah,
my
yeah.
um, which works for me because I've been in like school forever, basically, and even now, like I'm still kind of in school. But it's just like managing that time a little bit better, and it's so true with the 9 to 5 kind of mentality in that we're making bets on the security of that job as opposed to like making those
Yeah.
bets on yourself. And it's not easy, right? Like I'm not going to be out here being like, oh, being an entrepreneur, it's like, oh, it's totally amazing. It's going to be a walk in the park, because it's not. And there'll be
Oh, yeah,
days
totally.
where like you're just
Yeah.
a little bit stressed, and that's when I find the
Yeah,
management of emotions is so key. Like people think, oh yeah, financial literacy, it's
100%.
just, your cash flow, what you're spending, how much money you're making. But
Yep,
part of it is also the emotional side. Like I had a few months where I was like, holy crap, like I don't know if we're gonna make payroll, and freaking out doesn't help. So like I actually put a lot of time into like meditation and like mindfulness practices, just because
totally.
those fears and doubts can creep in, and you need a little bit of those tools to kind of deal with that, right? So like one thing that I recommend to all my students and even like friends, people getting into entrepreneurship, is watch the documentary Stutz. It's on Netflix.
Okay.
Stutz, Stutz, and it's Jonah Hill and his therapist, and he's like going through how his therapist is
Oh,
helping him
yeah.
like set up
Yeah, yeah,
boundaries,
yeah, 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 yeah.
deal with his like mental health and like those fears and doubts. And it's awesome because it breaks down like I think it's like 10 different tools you could
Yeah,
use. And one of them is like just naming that voice in your head that comes from, for me, I kind of realize is like, hey, this voice in my head that's kind of negative, that doesn't necessarily believe in myself and kind of pops up every now and then. Like that's not my voice. Like that was implanted from other people. I kind of realized after some reflection, it was probably like just bullies that I had as a kid. And I was like, cool, now that that's separate from my own thoughts and like my own being as I look at it, it's like, hey, well, I don't have to believe that, right? It's like, yeah, that voice is there. And, still have to go
yeah.
through that work of like, forgiving your bullies, all this like, inner work that they call it. And I used to think this stuff was like woo woo until I realized like, no, it helps actually a lot, because now I'm not like fighting myself. Instead, I'm like, okay, well, that's not
Dude.
me. That's just a voice that was placed in my head. It doesn't
Yeah,
help. And then now I can work on, okay, how do I talk to myself a little bit better? And I find that that's not just something that 9 to 5ers deal with. I feel like that's just like a human condition where it's like for some
Oh yeah.
reason we start believing negativity more than like the
Yeah.
positivity. And like it's so weird, but I find it fascinating in that like that's an aspect of getting into entrepreneurship that no one really sees, right? It's like especially
Yep.
now with like social media, you see everything's like, oh yeah, everything's awesome, everything's
Positive.
great. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's positive, but it's like
Yeah.
not necessarily. Like it can be a war zone at times, right?
100%. Some like I mean on the oh man, there's a lot to unpack right on that one there. I think a lot back actually on the bullying thing, and then I was going to talk about some like a finance comment too because but I had a bully a few years ago actually, so to say. But like I don't know, we're adults now. Kind of just bumped into them. I would consider him kind of like a buddy or whatever. Won't name names, but this guy came up to me and apologized, and I was like, "For what, man?" And he's like, "I was pretty tough on you as a kid," and I was like, "No, whatever." Like I didn't think much of it. And then I thought about it later, and I was like, "Whoa." I was like, that guy must have done some reflecting. I'd kind of already like forgiven. Oh, hey, buddy. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. You can hear me?
Okay, cool. Yeah, we're good. I'll try to. I don't know exactly where you segued off. I just documented the 26-minute mark, so I'll cut that
Mhm.
piece out.
Yeah,
Um,
no worries.
I don't know where I was going there. I'll try to jump back in where we were though. But yeah, had a buddy apologize at an event that we bumped into each other at, and I was kind of like, huh, this guy's had a lot of time to probably reflect to come to that thing because I'd kind of forgiven him, but then I don't know, just like time went on. But then when he had said that to me, it made me think a lot about how he had gotten to that point. How I'd probably already kind of forgiven him. I'd thought through that process a little bit, but that's an interesting thing that you just brought up there. I hadn't heard many people say that, but it is, I think, a very fundamental thing. I mean, whatever helped me shape out to some success stuff too from those experiences. So I don't like knock them as a detrimental piece of the childhood piece. Whatever. Like it helped me either be a little bit tougher, a little bit smarter about different ththings. Because as kids pick on kids because other kids are, maybe doing a little bit. They pick on you because you're a threat, I guess, as a child, whatever it is. Many reasons, but I did pretty well in school, grade wise, and athletics. So then I could see how that could be turned into a target versus a support system, real quick.
Mhm.
As you go on that, but then on the finance thing where you're just talking about though, and going from like that nine to five security, or kind of like alluding to that a minute ago, is when you have to manage all those finances on yourself, it's quite empowering in some ways because you get to be the decision maker for it. But if something isn't going right or something takes a turn, what is your patience and what does calm you look like? Because
Yeah, right.
calm you on social media can still have a smile, but behind the scenes you're like, whew, sweating. Something
Yeah.
didn't go well either on investment side, or someone sends you a invoice that doesn't match an expectation. But whatever that looks like, because I'm sure that you've had some dealings with that in terms of like the contracting side of getting folks to help you out with work. You figure that out as you're going though. I'm sure not everyone now is probably a little bit smoother to work with on your end
Mhm.
of things, but initially I'm sure that there is we'll call it a lesson on someone's invoice that came your way. And I think having those things is stressful but makes you better in the long haul, and just trying to remain calm in those situations is definitely tough because sometimes that whatever we'll call it, the financial surprise, um, is kind of all you got in the bank or whatever at the time. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like you don't have the flexibility or freedom to be like, oh, no big deal, because it does matter initially pretty tightly, right? For making the right decision about whatever it is that's going on. So yeah, I think that's kind of where you're going with that. Just trying to, or explain that to the listener a little bit more because it's hard to describe unless you've like done it in some ways. Hopefully, this
Oh, totally.
got someone thinking about it a little bit, right? And until you get like an email with an invoice that's different than what you expected, and you have that moment of OF. I don't know if I'm allowed
Yeah.
to say this or whatever, but you're like, whoa, like what do I do now? Due dates in 30 days. And then I kind of started looking at time frames a little bit differently. I don't know if you did this when you're first jumping out of the plane, so to say. When I left the day job, it was actually for like a tech app thing that kind of fell
Cool.
by the wayside or whatever. But then the outcome of that led to doing consulting and other things. But you kind of have that moment of like, oh, I got 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever, where I'm okay. But then after that, like, what's the plan? Am I going back to a job or what's happening here? Right. And then, the importance of, realizing those timelines is good too. Because if you did have to go back to a job, like you were saying, before you kind of move forward, like that's okay. That happens often. Whatever. You try not
Yeah.
to be so flaky on the resume though, where you're inconsistent. But if you have to go back because of the plan changed, then I don't know. That'd be okay.
Yeah. It can still work out. I mean, I find that if you leave the job for an opportunity to make more money, it actually makes it a little bit more difficult versus if you leave the job to try and make more of an impact, the money will tend to come. Now, of course, you got to be smart and
Totally.
like have an actual plan. Okay, how are we going to make your money? What's our like break even point? How much do I need to make just to make
Yeah.
sure that everyone else gets paid? Because that's another mindset shift I find is that with nine
When
to
you're
five, where it's
paying.
like, hey, I got to get paid like month to month, versus when you become an entrepreneur investor, it's like everyone else kind of gets paid before you, whether you have a team or you're subcontracting
Totally.
work, or like if you're a one man show, then you can still pay yourself, but now it's like you're putting a bunch of your time versus okay, once you start managing a team, that's like hey, they get paid regardless if like I get paid. And then I used to
Totally.
look at that when I still had the limiting belief of like still kind of being stuck in an entrepreneur or sorry, in the 9 to 5 mindset. I'm just like, dang, why does everyone get paid before me? And then I kind of realized it's like, no, it's kind of cool. Like, yeah, I have to deal with a little bit of the stress, a little bit of that push that makes me better. Like I have to show up even more than my team so that they could get paid. And then I was like, cool, like I'm helping put food on these people's tables. And something that I like to do in my team is make sure everyone understands that hey, they're also responsible for their own business, and I encourage them to start their own businesses because it shows them what it's truly like. Then they can kind of see what
Right.
it's like
You
to
get
be
the
in my shoes.
appreciation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
Versus if they're just an employee, then they're like, okay, well, it breeds that kind of mindset. And yeah, I've kind of seen like the highest performing team members
Yeah.
I have all run their own business or a side hustle. And I really push them like, hey, like let's focus on not just getting paid because that's gonna happen as long as we're actually providing value to the marketplace. And then like as a teacher, of course, I'm gonna push this idea that we're all trying to educate ourselves to become better, right? Because your business is never gonna exceed your personal development, right? So it's like, hey, we have this
Totally.
company culture where it's like, hey, let's all go to the gym and have a minimum level of like fitness. Let's all make sure we take care of our mental health. Like if you need a break, let me know. I'm totally okay with that as long as things get done. And then I found that as the team
Yeah.
grows, they just got better and better. And like the amount of growth I see in like examples, one of my social media managers, Crystal, she started just as an internship, and then later on she ended up like investing in herself. She ended up getting a mentor and then kind of building up her skills, and she came back a year later and then she was just like crushing it. Like I would have discussions on like marketing with her, like what's ROAS, like return on ad spend,
Yeah.
what are our KPIs, and then she had no problem kind of talking about that, and then even came back with better strategies. And once we kind of put her on the team, like our growth was crazy. I think we increased engagement by like 54% in the first like 90 days, increased revenue as well. And I was surprised. I was like, cool. Like it shows that the people that invest in themselves get further. And I've seen people where like they just didn't think they had the money to invest in themselves, And this kind of led to like these limiting beliefs of like, okay, now they were more focused on, making an extra $100 or even extra $1,000, as opposed to like, let's look at these larger opportunities that can lead to
Yeah.
like equity, can lead to 6, 7 figures, and then true freedom, as opposed to be like, let's just make a quick little buck, but then not necessarily like help, right? And I found that this little change in like, hey, we do have to invest in ourselves and our own education. And one of my philosophies, I look at business as it's self-development with money on the tail end. It's like, hey, as long as you keep
Mm.
getting better, it's
Yeah.
almost impossible that you go down over the long term. And I always mention that it's like over the long term, because you might
Yeah.
have to invest in like a coaching program or even hire a consultant. Like I hired a consultant that helped build out our automations on my Instagram. And at first, like I was scared because like I think I spent like $22,000 USD on this. And like that's a ton of money. That's more than my teaching degree. And I was like, oh my God, like I don't know if this is going to work out. I'm leaving for Asia. But I knew I needed this because there's that 12-hour time difference. So like nighttime in the West is daytime in Asia. Daytime in
Right.
Asia is nighttime in the West. So I knew when I went to bed, I still needed to make sure that we could still help people out in the West. Even some of the team was handling this. And it was crazy because at first I was like, oh, like I don't know if this is gonna work. Like I'm using a bot. I don't know if it's gonna sound like me. I don't know if people are actually gonna buy from a bot. And by continually educating myself on something that I was uncomfortable with, then I realized like I would wake up some days in Asia and then have like money in the bank account. And I was like, this is unreal. Like this was totally outside of my vision. I knew other people have done that, but like to experience it myself was pretty awesome. Like I didn't think it was possible to work abroad and then have like a bot sign people up for courses and programs and then like
Interesting.
help them out after. And I was like, oh, this is crazy, all through like a bot. But it was just a funny story. Like we were sitting in, I believe it was Thailand. Yeah, we were in a Thailand resort, and me and my friend were sitting there, and I was like, hey, let's test out this bot. And he was testing it out. He's messaging my bot, and then it's answering back. And he's like, hey, man, like this doesn't sound like you. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, and then we started talking out loud. Like the bot was texting, but I would talk as the bot. Like I would say it out loud, and then he would
Yeah. Yeah.
respond. And he's like, and we go back and forth, just being like, hey, we got to make this sound like you. And I still remember that day so clearly because we were just like at the pool, we're hanging out, we're on the computers, and then just going back and forth and like turning this bot from very robotic to, hey, this actually sounds like Pat now. And then like that's something where I kind of realized like, yeah, you still got to make it human at least, because then otherwise people just be like, oh, like it's not Patrick, it's a friggin' bot.
Right. So you kind of had to finesse that bot evolution for you guys in critiquing like how it sounded, because it probably did okay with some folks that maybe
Yeah.
as a fact like didn't know you as well. That was probably like a thing that I think of right there is like someone who didn't know you as well. Maybe that goes okay. I've set up a couple of spots before and they can be pretty good. I mean, initially if it's starting off a conversation usually okay, but then as it gets a little bit more advanced or depends what the ask is, then you can
Mm-hmm.
kind of dwindle. That's cool though. That's really
Yeah.
neat.
Yeah.
What's
That's neat.
something that I was just thinking of here is kind of go back to like or how do people even like get a hold of you, or what you're actually selling? I realize as we're chatting here that might not have been as clear or whatever. I was just thinking that, but ultimately you're selling like a coaching course or coaching opportunity for real
Mm-hmm.
estate investment. Ultimately, is what you're doing. Is that correct? For the
Yeah,
most part.
essentially. Like we have a couple programs. There's like more of like we have lifetime access into the group, and then to get the one-on-one calls with myself. We have a 90-day program, which is a little bit more of a crash course if someone wants to start learning real estate investing. And then we also have an intro program where it's more so like, hey, let's get your finances ready. Let's get you start thinking about money differently so that when you're ready, you can make the jump, whether that's into real estate or investing or even just starting your own business. And
Awesome.
with all those programs, we kind of make it so that there's clear step by steps, right? It's like, hey, if you want to just improve your financial literacy. We'll help you out with that, get you financially abundant, get you understanding, okay, how does money work? How does debt work? How do you like gamify your credit score and actually start adding multiple sources of income? From there, people usually graduate to getting into the real estate side. Where they start noticing like, hey, this is possible. Maybe just need a few mindset tweaks so that they understand, okay, well, this is going to be different from working a job. Then we basically build them a customized real estate roadmap. We make sure their marketing fits not only their schedule, because time's going to be kind of a constraint for some people, but also make it authentic to them. Because I don't teach like fake it till you make it. Instead, I just show people, hey, like it's okay to document the process. Like you could be a plumber getting into real estate. You don't need to be a real estate guru. Like I'm not a guru. I'm like a few steps ahead. I want to help you out. And I've even had some people where they're like above my pay grade, where I'm just like, hey, well, I'd love to help you. Like, sure, I can get paid for it, but I think this person's a little bit better, and kind of send them to a different coach that kind of focuses more on that. And then finally, something that we've also been helping out with students is just really becoming a high performer. Because later on, especially when students are looking to scale and people are already investors, maybe they've already done 5 to 10 deals, their problems are very different. Like they're going to have issues around, hey, how do I have the time to scale? How do I hire the right people? How do I know when to fire someone? Like that's something I had to learn too, right? And a big one too I found is, how do I build real estate and a business, or, you know, still thrive in my career, but then not have my relationships suffer? Well, I kind of fell into that by accident, where people are just like, yeah, like I got the money, I got the free time, or maybe I'm still working on the free time, but my relationships are suffering. Like my dating life sucks, or I have someone and I have a family, but I'm not having enough time with them. So that's a different kind of problem we help real estate investors with, in that, how do you still have those like good relationships? Because we all get into entrepreneurship usually, one, for money, but also for free time. But then we also don't want our other aspects of our life to like suffer, right? So it's kind of funny. I fell into the space, and this is something super new. Like I think we've only done this, it's only been like a few months, where it's like dating and personal relationships for real estate investors or aspiring real estate investors.
Interesting.
Because then we don't want you to just like, you know, lead with money. I was like joke around of like, people ask me like, hey, like, how did you like find your girlfriend? Or like, you know, how do you make it so that they're not like, you know, quote unquote a gold digger or whatnot? And then I was like, you know, my girlfriend doesn't really know like what I do for work, and she's not really super interested about that. She's more interested in like, you know, I'm actually passionate. I'm actually trying to build something, help people. And as a joke, like whenever I'm coaching these people, like we actually did a infield training where we took out these real estate investors, right? Where we kind of schooled them on, half of them wanted to just learn networking to raise money. The other half wanted to learn networking just because they actually wanted to improve like their dating lives, right? And it's funny because the two go hand in hand. Like when I'm finding money partners and joint venture partners, it's like I'm testing out and dating them, right? So what was kind of cool was I said, hey, don't tell people you're in real estate. Like don't tell people you're in business. They'll find out eventually, right? Especially when you're just initially meeting them. And as a joke, like I always tell people like I work at McDonald's. And then they're like, oh, what do you do? Like, oh, yeah, I flip burgers. And then they can kind of tell that like I'm just kidding around. And then once they get me on Instagram, they're like, oh, like you're actually a real estate investor. Like, why didn't you say that before? I was like, oh, I was just having fun. Like we were just hanging out, right? And then it just creates a little bit more of that intrigue, right? Because the big piece I find, especially with entrepreneurs or people that are a little bit more high performers, it's like they want to almost try to validate themselves as opposed to be like, hey, it's just a bonus that I do these things, right? Like you offer value in itself, even if you don't run a business, even if you don't make a ton of money. Like that's okay. That's like a bonus, right? Like, yeah, it's important to get that handled, but you don't necessarily want to lead with that because you're kind of attracting the wrong type of partner, right? So yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting where, yeah, we take like these people that are almost like stuck in their heads a little bit, and then now they're start like laughing, joking around, having fun, and then they realize it's like, oh, like there's a different way of communicating that draws people in. And then it's a bonus when they find out, oh, like this guy or this girl has the opportunity in business, or hey, they're actually doing fairly well, but it's not what keeps them around or like gets them that initial like attraction. So yeah, I kind of fell into that by accident. It was kind of funny. But yeah, it's kind of cool that people
You're doing that coaching
get
too.
the help. Yeah, I would do with that kind of coaching too. And I always try to align it too, because I don't want to be like trying coaching everything, right? Where it's like, hey, we want real estate coaching. And it's like, yeah, do I want to just like teach everyone the dating side? Not necessarily. I kind of want to align it to like, real estate investors, aspiring real estate investors. People just have a little bit more access to capital, just because I find the pain of not having a partner or not having that support system, or people like have a good social circle. Sometimes that's more painful than not having the money, which kind of is a testament that there's more important things than money. And a big part of that is going to be the relationships, right? It's like I've had relationships personally and professionally where you almost get rich by accident, where it's like just having like my girlfriend, she's awesome, great support system. She understands what I'm kind of dealing with, a little bit of stresses, and she's like my safe space. And like that's huge. Like there's a ton of stress that comes with getting into business, going and kind of pave your own path, that just having a partner, whether they support you just through indirectly in the business, or maybe they're actually part of the business, like that goes so far, because it can get lonely, right? And we do want people we can kind of relate with. It doesn't have to just be the personal relationships, right? Like I have business relationships where we'll just sit down and we'll just like not necessarily complain, but we'll just like try and mastermind and figure out problems together. And it's just so nice to have this community that relates, right? Because I'll have other friends, I love them, but if I'm like,
I know what you're saying,
a deal, like, I lost a 6-figure deal. They're like, oh, cool, good for you, and then like that's it. Whereas it's like my buddies that have gone through that, they feel that pain too, and it's like you kind of get to connect with that. So it goes far. Like the relationships, personal or professional, helps a lot, because you don't want to just have money but then not have these like connections too, right? So at the end of the day, we're still human, right? Like I don't want to just be a business person or investor. I always say like I'm a human first, and then I do all these other things.
Totally. That makes a lot of sense. I relate very heavily to that too. I think that there is, a lot to life outside of the workday. And that came from being a little obsessed with like a job, and then getting out of that job and then realizing that like that trade-off for time and stuff, although it was good, I got lots of great training from that stuff, wouldn't have traded it for that path. But could there have been an upside to realizing it sooner? Maybe. Or just like having a better balance versus trying to impress for not a lot of reward, because that's how that was kind of done at the time. But then it comes into play from what you said earlier about the mindset of employee versus ownership, because I even think now I'd be a way better employee after realizing how much stress off my plate in terms of having to worry about, like you're saying, like the specific on finances, if you have employees or folks that you work with, in regards to other companies, you're forever juggling those relationships and making sure everyone's happy, and it's a healthy trade that way too. So no, that's really awesome to hear. What Patrick and Jennifer, this is awesome. I think we covered lots here. What do you guys have coming up next for events? I know that's something that was on the website on the other screen here. For me, it was events, and we had one coming up. But do you want to touch on that a little bit more? I think it's just in August here for you guys. What does that look like for you? Sure. And what do people expect there? So
So we have our we throw like free events every single month. Kind of alternates between just fun networking, meet with other investors, aspiring investors, and then sometimes community events. Like last time we were at Shalom Mission doing a little bit of community work with people in Alliance, but also we just invite anyone in. But on August 17th, we're doing a free real estate networking event, and it's going to be at Demecca. It's a restaurant in Winnipeg there. Great food, awesome vibes there. And it's very like casual, right? Like even if you're not an investor, you're just interested in possibly seeing what it's like to be an investor or just meeting people. It's a great place to just network. And we always run these like completely free. And I find that it's lower pressure, right? Like if you're paying for an event, it's like cool. There's almost it becomes transactional very quickly if you pay for an event, right? Versus if it's free, it's like cool. If I can connect you with awesome people, or if you want to sign up to be a student or you want to be a money partner or whatever, awesome. But if you want to just hang out and like chat and ask me questions, I'd introduce you to other people there. It's totally a great space for that. And I'm actually pretty excited just because it is one of our summer events and they have a DJ there as well. So it's going to be a little bit more casual. But hey, there's always deals kind of going around in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they'll be at 7 p.m. on August 17th. And if people want to get tickets, they can either, reach out at Alliance Real Estate on Instagram or even my Instagram. We'd love to kind of see you there. Tickets are, again, completely free. You can buy your own food and drinks there, come hang out. And whether you drop by for like 5 minutes or if you stay the whole evening, like I'm going to be there. I always promise that I will be in Winnipeg for these events with Alliance, and I kind of travel around. I have students all around Canada at this point. Like right now I'm in Edmonton and got a few students here, but Winnipeg's really our base. And one of my goals and one of our goals at Alliance Real Estate is really to build out this base in Winnipeg to have this like free networking, right? Like it can get lonely in real estate. So just connecting with these people and showing them, hey, like we have actually a community here that wants to see you win. Because a lot of people need that, right? Like I always coach my students like, hey, like once they're in our community, like I want them to actually share their brags, their daily brags, their daily wins. This is something I got from one of my own coaches where, hey, like we want a safe space where you can share your win and then no one's jealous. It's like, hey, that's friggin' awesome. You close a deal, you close a money partner and you're doing well, like awesome. We want to root you on. And that little shift, having that community, I find helps so much because then people feel like they belong. They feel like, hey, people are rooting for them. And it goes so far, especially when things are getting difficult, because things will get difficult in this journey in real estate. And, if you're alone, like it can be tough. So that's why it's like that community aspect is so key. And that's why we wanted to include the group coaching. We're all learning together as opposed to just one-on-ones where we're like, it's just a connection between coach and mentor. Because I want my students to grow past needing just a coach and mentor. It's like, well, I'd love to help you out, but hey, if you have access to a whole community, like not only can they help you out, but later on you get to a point in your real estate investing, just goes back. Yeah. Just building that community for sure.
That's awesome. What about you kind of touched on this a little bit there. We'll make sure to include these in both on a podcast website and in the write-up when this goes online for a listener here. But how do folks find you? If you just want to say that out loud, I know we got a website, we have Instagram, business and personal account. What are those handles, and is there anywhere else where folks can get a hold of you?
Yeah, for sure. So personally, they can reach out to me on Instagram at Patrick J, like just the letter J. It's my middle name. It's just the initial, Hilario. And they could also reach out to at Alliance Real Estate on Instagram as well. We do have our website, www.alliancerealestate.com. But yeah, if people want to reach out, what I usually do is like I offer free real estate readiness audits where people thinking about getting into real estate, or maybe they're thinking about scaling their real estate. Maybe they're already been in real estate investing. And what we do is I just break down where their situation is, what their goals and obstacles are. We do a full-on audit of hey, maybe you're ready to start scaling, or maybe, hey, let's work on your financials first. Let's give you tips on how to build your credit so that you can prepare for real estate. And that's really where I can figure out how to build them a customized real estate roadmap. And I give those real roadmaps for free. If people want our help and they want to, fast track this process, get customized help with us, we'd love to do that. But if they don't, and they're like, cool, I got my roadmap, I got the audit, I'll do it from here. awesome. Like I'd love to do that. And whether people
Very cool.
get success with their programs or without, I always look at it. It's like, hey, like it's a win-win, right? Like I view it as almost like a wisdom download where like I didn't learn everything on my own. Like I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, let's say. Like people came before me and gave me this information on real estate. That's a big reason why we drop like 2 videos on YouTube. Like I have a YouTube channel as well. It's at Patrick J Hilario. We do 2
Perfect.
YouTube videos a week.
I was just gonna ask.
Yeah. We do
Yeah.
2 videos a week, and it's like it's free content, right? If someone takes that content and then like grows a real estate business, awesome. Like kudos to you. But if someone wants a little bit more of the accountability, implementation, have like to call the bat phone where like you just reach out to me, then hey, I'd love to help you out with that as well.
That is awesome. I'd love to hear that too. The sharing of information is awesome. I think you offer a great program here, and I just maybe covered lots. Is there anything? I think we nailed it here. So I'm gonna call it there. This was awesome, and thank you so much, Patrick, for being on here today. I don't doubt that this will not be our last podcast. As I say with many folks, I think that, awesome. Yeah, this is a great conversation today. All that contact information will be located in the bottom, both on our website and on the YouTube channel for now. And as we expand that footprint, we'll include that contact information for you. So thanks again for jumping on today, and we will chat soon. Hopefully I can make it out to that event.
Yeah, I'd love to see you there, man. Hey, thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick.